Welcome to COIQ, where you learn how health innovators maximize their success. I'm your host, Dr. Roxie, founder of Legacy DNA and international best-selling author of How Health Innovators Maximize Market Success. Through candid conversations with health innovators, early adopters, and influencers, you'll learn how to bring your innovation from idea to startup to market domination. And now, let's jump into the latest episode of COIQ. Welcome back to the show, COIQ listeners. On today's episode, we have Evan Ehrenberg with us, who is the co-founder and CEO of Clara. Welcome to the show, Evan.
Thank you so much for having me, Roxie. It's a pleasure to be here.
So tell our audience a little bit about your background and what you've been innovating these days.
Sure thing. So my personal background is a bit interesting. I ended up going to college very young. I started when I was 11, went to UC Berkeley.
Wait, can you say that again?
I started college when I was 11 years old. I went to UC Berkeley for a bachelor's degree in cognitive science and computational modeling, and then went over to MIT for my PhD in computational neuroscience when I was 16. And towards the very end of my PhD, when I was actually getting ready to defend my thesis, I joined a close friend of mine who was starting a company that would turn into Clara Health, and then actually ended up dropping out of my PhD just a few months before defending to focus on it full time. And so
oh my gosh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, a little interesting.
Man, you got bit by the entrepreneurial bug.
Oh, absolutely. It was some of the most fun work I've ever done, and incredibly impactful. So it was, it was a heavy decision, certainly, but it was ultimately an easy one, just because we were very fortunate to be really heavily impacting people's lives, saving lives in some cases. And to compare, doing that versus getting the PhD, which is just a piece of paper, really, it kind of became clear which was the right decision. So yeah, and it's, so what Clara Health does is we're sort of this matching platform that is trying to help make it much easier to access clinical trials. So if you look at all of the inequities in healthcare, clinical trials are one of the ones where you see the most significant inequity and also the least diversity. So they're just incredibly difficult to access, even to learn about them, to find which ones are available, and then to actually get involved and participate. There is just really, really high bars of health literacy. It really matters where you are. Academic institutions that are in city centers are running more clinical trials. They're going to be more ready to talk with you about them. Oftentimes, if your physician isn't the person running the clinical trial, they often don't even know about it. So it's really hard to get help to learn about them. Mm-hmm. And then you have to often take time off of work. They're just very inflexible for people to work with. And so we set out to build a platform to just take all these wonderful consumer experiences that we're seeing with, Airbnb for renting, people's places, to Uber and Lyft for getting rides, and tried to apply as much of the things that work there into clinical trials. Of course, with all the regulations and everything, there's some things that don't always carry over, but trying to make them a lot easier to take part in so that we're really democratizing that access so everybody can get involved, have a really, really easy experience. And kind of started off just as a project to see what we could do. Mm-hmm. But we're fortunate enough to have it sort of turn into a business, and, through getting investment, actually scale that up into something that's been, so far very successful that we're really proud of.
What a great story. So I have to say, I think at 11, I was still playing with Barbies.
Don't get me wrong. I was still playing with Legos and things too.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm going to just do some cognitive science on the side over here. That's awesome.
Exactly.
So take us through, from the time that you determined that this was going to be a business venture and not a hobby or a competition, or side project, to, some of the milestone accomplishments over the last few years. Let's do that.
Sure. So, certainly when we first started taking even just like friends and family type investment, that was, I think even the decision to go out and try to do that was already a pretty big shift of like, okay, this seems like something that could really work. But even then, we looked at it as this could work, but startups are extraordinarily fickle and odds are really against us. But there's people who believe in us, who want us to work on this. We'll definitely give it our best shot. And we didn't really have any. We had high hopes, but our expectations were frankly quite low. We were realistic about it and thought, hopefully we learn some things. Maybe we can influence some industry leaders to think in a different way from conversations with them. But it probably wasn't going to go very far, just because it's really hard to start a business. And I had some experience working on a startup with my PhD thesis advisor, but even that was very slow and everything. So that was kind of when we got things started. We got some initial little bit of capital from friends and family, and then we got some capital from some of the kind of like college investors. So there's Dorm Room Fund and Rough Draft Ventures that invest small-ish check sizes into student-led companies. So companies run by people who are still in their graduate or undergraduate programs, which both myself and my co-founder were at the time. And so with that, I think all in together, we had maybe $100,000. So we hired some team members, started working on some MVPs. Ultimately, we probably should have just put all of our time into business development and market research, because the MVPs that we developed were scrapped very quickly and were practically useless. So definitely a lot of learning about what not to spend money on. But we're fortunate enough through some advisors, we got connected to some VC firms in the Bay Area. And then those VC firms connected us with a lot of really fantastic angel investors who had such wonderful advice. And quickly we kind of pulled together, what would be like sort of our pre-seed round that had, more money to like substantially actually hire out a team and really, scrap the MVP and make something that was more of a product, not minimum viable. And the struggle was on. It was always a really tough battle, as is, anything in healthcare. So many barriers we came up against, so many times that we thought, this isn't going to work, or we're going to have to shut down, or it's not going to scale. But if you're passionate about it, you'll just keep, banging your head against the problem until you figure out, oh, this is the workaround, or this is how you can fix it. And we got fortunate enough to, we had Coastal Ventures ran our seed round, and we moved the entire company from Boston to San Francisco to scale up more, hire some of the fantastic talent here, be out in kind of the tech, hub of the world. And finally found really good traction kind of early last year. We had, maybe 2 years ago, had our first customers on the pharmaceutical side who were helping run faster clinical trials. But it was still, everything had to be done through a warm intro. No one knew who we were. We were just some kids doing a startup. Pharma companies are not very startup friendly as much as they like to tout innovation. So it took a while, but I'd say in the last maybe, year and a half, we've finally, it was kind of an interesting wake-up call. I think we kept wondering, is this what success looks like? Is this what success looks like? And then when it actually happened, we're like, oh, we were actually failing. Like all those times we thought it was success. Like, this is actually what it looks like and feels like. I wish we had maybe tried to iterate faster and given up on some old ideas a little quicker, because they really were not working as well as we thought they should.
So what was that? Was that like a few paying customers, or was that, some positive feedback, but no one writing a check yet? What was that difference between maybe the early perception of success versus the new mile marker?
Let's see. Early on, it was, a lot of, I think it was mostly, there was two things, I guess. One of it was the conversion to actually signing things. So, early on, we do a lot of pitches. We'd get generally good feedback. It was hard to get constructive criticism, which is really what you want early on. So we'd try to pry it out of people and try to adjust based on that. But really it was just a lot of very polite, things that went silent. So that, the deal never moved forward. And also we were really having to push pretty hard on all of our outbound outreach and sales. And then we started to get a combination of, one, people were reaching out to us. Either they had found out about us doing research on how they could run faster clinical trials and have more patient-centric clinical trials, or they had been recommended to us by either another pharma company or a patient advisor or one of the clinical trial sites or principal investigators they're working with who had worked with us. And that was exciting to get that actual inbound where, at some points we didn't even know how these people had heard about us. They were just reaching out. I think a lot of it as well was just refining. Part of it was refining our offerings, like what we were actually delivering, figuring out like what really worked, what was very helpful, and how people wanted that to be presented to them. And then a lot of it was just the pitch as well. We kind of refined that over and over. The deck went from a 40-slide monstrosity down to like a 7 or 8 slide, very simple, clean. This is what we do. It's a little oversimplified, but at least you can retain it in your memory. And then it just got kind of to the point where like every conversation moved pretty much all the way to the proposal stage, and the majority of proposals moved into contracts, and the ones that didn't kind of moved to like now just isn't the right time, but they would be interested. And I think for a long time we're skeptical, like, is it really on the back burner, or is it on, is it not on anything at all? But sure enough, sometimes a year or more later, those clients came back and ended up signing. So that was exciting. And I think that just that, feeling of like every time you go into a sales meeting, having the expectation that's going to go well, that was a really big shift for us. So that was really cool.
Your mindset. Mindset shift. So, I have probably had more millennial innovators on the show in the last 30 days than ever before. And,
wow.
and so, tell us what that's like. What do you think is different about being a millennial innovator? What kind of beliefs or point of view that you think, gives you advantages to maybe disrupting some of the status quo and the bureaucracy that we've been living with for the last 50, 60 years?
Sure. I think the biggest thing is just kind of this lack of set expectations of how things should be done, or what things can or can't be done. And it certainly does lead to a lot of failed experiments of things where industry leaders would say, well, I could have told you that wasn't going to work. But it also leads to a lot of things where it does work out, and industry leaders would have said that wasn't going to work, but it actually does. You just have to try it in the right way. I think that's we've seen a lot of companies tackle, access to clinical trials. It's kind of like the patient-facing version. The pharma-facing version is clinical trial recruitment. How do you find people who can take part in these studies? And a lot of this is actually it sounds niche to the general public, but if you're running a clinical trial, this is actually one of your biggest concerns. 86% of clinical trials fall behind schedule because they can't recruit patients fast enough. It's like the biggest problem on people's minds. Yeah. And so there's a lot of industry veterans who know this, who try to come and tackle the problem and try to solve it. And the solutions are very incremental. They're better solutions. Like every company I've seen that's tried to attack it has come at it with a slightly new angle that has been better than whatever the industry standard is. But, we've seen it's still been a very fragmented industry because no one's really created a solution that's way better than everything else, that really just works and solves it. Everything just kind of attempts to solve it a little better, and it kind of fails a little less than things have in the past. And we approach this as, like I said, it was originally a project. We kind of looked at this and thought, well, it seems like really a marketplace platform that has every clinical trial on it. Like that's what patients want, it's what they need. But then you need a ton of support as well, because they're really hard to understand. There's all these hoops you have to go through. So you need a massive support system. And, some of that should be automated for scalability, but it's healthcare. Like you have to have a human touch. So we just have to be comfortable with the fact that you're going to have, live support people, helping out along the way. And a lot of things that, having a system that isn't fully automated, tech veterans fear away from that. It's like, oh God, that doesn't sound scalable. And focusing so much on technology instead of more so, I think focusing so much on technology and so much on the patient. I mean, we really approach this as how can we make a better experience for patients? Whereas people who are veteran, industry veterans, they've always been working on it from the pharma perspective of how do we solve this problem for pharma and biotech and medical device companies. And so the solutions are very pharma focused. They really leave the patient out of it. And we kind of thought that the solution we had in mind was pretty obvious. We kept looking around for someone to implement it, but no one was doing it. So we just thought, I guess we have to if no one else will.
Right.
The world kind of deserves something like this to work. And so I think that's gone a really long way. And of course, to speak genuinely to what it is, there is a lot of discrimination as well. And it's, I think it's fair. Myself, my co-founder, we do have far less industry experience than a lot of other companies that are out there. And so there are things that we are learning on the job that other people have known for decades. And we supplement that by hiring those industry veterans and by finding these fantastic advisors and really, really smart investors who have helped fill in the gaps for us very, very rapidly. But ultimately it's everything from sales, obviously, when I go into a sales conversation, I'm a 26-year-old, pitching a very expensive solution to like a top pharma company. And if it weren't for, my title as like co-founder and CEO, it would be incredibly difficult to convince these people. It's a big uphill battle. And we also saw on the East Coast, like back in Boston, that was also biased, like pitching to investors. People were much more comfortable investing with an older individual who had seen a lot more things, who had more experience, perhaps who had done a few companies before. And we got laughed out of a lot of rooms actually to ask for so much and to share an idea that didn't have patents behind it, things like that. You have a very traditional kind of biotech investment model. It wasn't until we very fortunately got connected out with investors in the Bay Area where there was a lot more familiarity and comfort in investing in students. A lot of people out here like drop out of college to start a company. It may not be the norm. I think you do tend to see that older entrepreneurs are often more successful, but it's at least more common here. And no one blinked an eye at that aspect of our pitch. And some people liked it. It was like, oh, cool. Like you dropped out of your PhD and my co-founder dropped out of undergrad. Like you guys must really believe this is going to work. So
it's a great story.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Dr. Roxie here with a quick break from the conversation. Are you trying to figure out what moves you need to make to survive and thrive in the new COVID economy? I want every health innovator to find their most viable and profitable pivot strategy, which is why I created the COVID Proof Your Business Pivot Kit. The Pivot Kit is a step-by-step framework that helps you find your best pivot strategy. It walks you through 6 categories you need to examine for a 360-degree view of your business. I call them the 6 critical pivot lenses. As you make your way through this comprehensive kit, you'll be armed with the tools, tips, and strategies you need to make sure you can pivot with speed without missing out on critical details and opportunities. Learn more at legacy-dna.com/kit. One of the things that I've noticed that's like a trend so far with a very small subset of millennial founders is this incredible sense of vulnerability and transparency about your experience. And it's a breath of fresh air. You are not coming on the show, acting like you got it all figured out. And, it's just I think there's so much to even learn from you, even though you have maybe less experience, because you're being transparent about the realities of what that journey is. And so it becomes, such a valuable conversation. Yeah.
Certainly. I agree. It's been, one of the nice things is, out here in the Bay Area, it seems like everyone is doing a company. And so you get to have a lot of really great conversations. And, I learned so much from our advisors and our investors, but I think some of the best things I learned are just from talking to other entrepreneurs who are just like, they're in here doing it every day. And you have a quick light conversation, over lunch or over some board games or something. And that ends up being like, oh man, I gotta go try that tomorrow. And like, it works really, really well.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's so much to unpack in what you were, mentioning. So I heard someone say the other day, like if you are a younger founder, that you need to have someone gray on your board or your advisory team. It made me think that maybe I should start letting my hair grow out. My gray hair, I shouldn't be coloring it anymore. But you also talked about, discrimination. And I think that can come in many forms. We've talked about race. We've talked about, previously about race and, gender and age. And so just kind of talk about what your experience has been with ageism, with racism, or with sexism, just within your founder team.
Sure. So, the things, I typically only come up against ageism, but and much less so out here in the Bay Area. And I think it's something that's going away, more broadly. So hopefully future generations of entrepreneurs will face it less. But my co-founder is an Asian American woman, and it's when we walk into a room, people look to me, and they very rarely direct questions towards her. And this is even after she's answered several questions very eloquently with much more technical expertise than I have. They'll still direct their questions at me. And you might argue it's like, oh, I'm the CEO, so there's a title thing, but she's president. Like we really hold very, slightly different focus, but it's not like she's siloed off in like only the technical details.
Right.
She understands the company in many ways better than I do, and the industry and so many things. And so, I think it's a little less prevalent here in the Bay Area, but it definitely doesn't go away completely. We've had, our own investors, a few of them, we've had those kind of slightly uncomfortable or off conversations where, my co-founder and I are both here talking with them, and, it feels like I'm getting all the FaceTime and, trying to look over to my co-founder more to try to direct their line of sight to her for a little more. And so, that's just like the subtle things. But those are just the things that you notice really easily. There's just so much, and she doesn't get nearly the recognition that she deserves for the work. Like a lot of people really underestimate her when, the people on our team and the investors that work very closely with us, they know she's all the brains. And I'm the person who goes and talks about all the things that we're doing. So they know to direct questions to her. But yeah, it's a real shame. And, it's something that I've heard so much from so many other founders, who are just so freaking incredible, like the smartest people who I've ever met. And they run up against this where people just are constantly doubting them. And, it's great to see them prove them all wrong. And it's great to see my friends and fellow founders go off and do these incredible things. And hopefully that will, enough of proving people wrong and enough of serving as a good role model for the next generation will make the next generation of startups look a lot more diverse and look a lot better. But yeah, it is something that you see almost everywhere.
So what do you think men like yourself, whether they're either the counterpart in the founding team or part of the executive, the investors, what do you think the responsibility is, or what can, men like yourself do to not enable that and to help kind of break free from some of that, like you said, for future generations?
Yeah. Certainly recognizing it is a big piece, and being very thoughtful and kind of intentional with your actions with that in mind. So, if you are going to go present alongside, your co-founder or another team member who may be facing more discrimination than you are, maybe see if you can have them speak first, so that, they're the ones who are driving the conversation, or see if you can, set up more questions for them to answer so that they can, I think when people who may be discriminated upon are speaking, obviously like their intellect and talent and experience, like that shines through. And
Right.
so I think just the more opportunity you give them to actually have that chance, hopefully shifts the mindset of other people who are in the room. And so anything you can do to, direct questions there, or have them speak first, or have them speak more, I think goes a long way. And then of course, just making sure to, I think, go a little extra in terms of acknowledgement and credit. Because I think a lot of people end up assigning a lot of the credit or success of what Clara Health is doing to me. Part of that could be because of the CEO title. Part of it could be just because I kind of look the part. But that could not be further from the truth. I mean, it obviously is incredible team effort. But even in terms of looking at the founding team, I mean, my co-founder is probably more responsible for the success of the company than I am. So I think just making that really clear at every turn that you have the chance to.
On a public show like this.
There you go. Absolutely.
Yeah. So switching gears a little bit. So let's talk about, so you've kind of described quite a bit of success that some roadblocks early on, but quite a bit of success that you've experienced, let's say for the last year and a half. How has COVID impacted your business, both positively or negatively?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. I guess starting with, negatively, obviously the entire team just feels incredibly burnt out. I mean, everyone now is dealing with all of the stress of being cooped up. Our team is super social. We're a small team, we're 16 people or so. Really feels like a family, and people are really bemoaning the loss of the office, being able to just work together and tap someone on the shoulder and strike up a conversation. And we'll do Zoom lunches and stuff, but it's not the same. So people miss that a lot.
Interesting, because you're such a tech generation, right? Growing up with it from the very from very early on, or the very beginning. So that's interesting to know that this is going to sound really terrible, but at the base level, we're all human beings, no matter what trends we grew up with, and human connection is really important, right?
Absolutely, yeah. We do, you can definitely tell, we use Slack so much, probably more than any company I've seen. I think all of our conversations are archived somewhere in Slack. And a lot of Zoom calls, obviously, as everybody is adapting to. So it was maybe less of an adaptation for us, but people miss that social element a ton. And just the burnout, it's stressful right now for everybody. I mean, whether you're directly impacted by COVID-19, or even if you're not feeling very impacted, just to see the world kind of feel on fire like this is extremely stressful. And then on top of that, we have this massive and really, really important Black Lives Matter movement that's going on across the U.S. and really across the world now. And that's just really stressful as well. Wanting to be able to help and feeling like you should always do more for all of these incredibly important causes. And seeing the news it's overwhelming and depressing and stressful. And to kind of wake up, see that, the time you get into work, you're kind of drained already. You finish working, you're tired, then you come back and there's more news. So that's been draining on the whole company, as I'm sure it is for really everyone. We have a really, really wonderful team here. So, one of our team members has a clinical psychology, training and background, and he and another one of our team members led support groups, kind of Zoom support groups, which I took part in. It was really wonderful. It was actually really so helpful. We've also shifted the work week to have half-day Fridays, kind of indefinitely until this is all over, which people have really appreciated. And then this week, actually, it's tough for everyone to take vacation at the same time. We've got a lot of work to do, but we actually kind of prepared to take a half week this week. And honestly, not everyone's abiding by it. We definitely I think, hire for a lot of workaholics. So I know myself and a few others have taken a handful of half days this week, but caught up on other days. But we've really tried to say no meetings past 1 p.m. today, or any day this week. Please take it off. Kind of hounding people if we see them on Slack or see them working.
That's brilliant.
Just to kind of catch up.
Yeah. So I have not heard that from anyone else. So do you think that it is because you have a clinical psychologist on your team, or do you think that it is because, you're, kind of this millennial generation, or do you think that where do you think the root of that belief system is that you're kind of putting people before profits?
Mm. It might be a younger generation. I was really surprised to see. So our lead investor of our Series A, the partner who led it, he's a younger guy too, and he was really supportive of it. He was just like, you guys, your team is mission critical. It's like the most important asset you have, and so prioritize that first. And I think he might have been the one who suggested, or at the very least supported, half day Fridays. And when we brought up the idea of doing a half day, a week, he's just like, yeah, like if that's going to help people feel better, absolutely do it. So having that support has been really great. And I think a big thing too is, and part of this is probably hiring mindset, but like we trust our team. Our team works really hard. They do incredible work, and I think you see a lot of Silicon Valley, even the big tech companies, especially big tech companies. They put a lot of investment into, some people would say spoiling their team, but it's absolutely worth it. I mean, people who you're working with, they are building those profits, and if you want to be maximally profit driven, which for us is actually big. A lot of people look at our company and think we're a nonprofit, but I actually care a lot about the business viability of things, because that's how you scale up and make impact. If we want to help billions of people, you have to make something that's like a really powerful engine that can get there.
Right.
But honestly, if you want that engine to work really well, you have to have the best people, and you have to have them loving their work and working as well as possible. And burning people out does not do that.
Full brain power.
And frankly, I've been so fortunate. I have to say, I'll admit, I'm probably more so on the side of the people who would not be doing half-day work weeks. But I've at least been smart enough to acknowledge that when my team has an idea about that, they're probably right. And it's worth it to just say like, fantastic, I'm all in, let's do it. So again, I can't claim these ideas. All I can claim is that I agreed to them. So,
well, and you're one of the top leaders of the company, and you lead by example, right? And so even if you've got a policy like that, that you inviting people to do the half days, if you aren't, you have some people on your team that will be less inclined to take those half a days too, right?
I am reminded of that constantly.
I bet you are. By the clinical psychologist, right? Oh, that's funny. So as we wrap up here, this has just been such an incredible conversation. Is there any, what advice, and you may go, oh man, this is my first time, or, like I'm such a young innovator, but no matter what age you are, you're learning lessons and you've got wisdom to share. And so what lessons have you learned that you want to share with our viewers and our listeners today?
Yeah. Always, I think, just talk to more people. That's one of the best things you can do. I still don't do it enough. But talk to more people in industry, talk to more investors, talk to more candidates. They'll just get a way better understanding of the breadth of opinions, the breadth of people, breadth of companies. In like doing market research, you'll really deeply understand what your customers need, what they're looking for. You'll understand what your competitors are doing and why and how and what's working and what isn't. Same with talking to industry advisors. In talking with investors, you'll get to understand the very, very broad range of types of investors out there. We, probably came close to making some mistakes of partnering with investors who we would have regretted working with. And, once you have an investor like that, you're married to them. They are with you for the ride. And frankly, we just got really lucky a lot of times that certain things that would have been bad happened to just not work out. And, that gave us time to find, people who are really, really well aligned with our mission and our team and our way of thinking. And also getting, better terms and everything. And same with your team. When you're hiring people, someone fantastic comes along, you don't want to miss out on people. But if you've already talked to, several dozen people with that type of job description, with that role, then you'll have a much better understanding of when somebody special comes along who you really want to make sure you don't miss to have on your team. And ask questions and don't be afraid to look dumb. I think that's just general life advice. And I think everyone finds it out sooner or later. And probably a lot of people listening have already learned that. But that's, even talking to customers, I'll ask questions that show some of my, lack of a bio background. That's, a little embarrassing, but I'm always glad I asked. And once you know it for the future. So
right.
I think that goes an incredibly long way.
Absolutely. We all are in this journey where we're learning along the way. And so I always say there's, it's cliche, but there's no dumb question. And, just to be real, because at the end of the day, we're all people. So, taking the masks off, not literally in this pandemic, era, but taking the masks off, right? It goes a long way with building trust and building credibility, I think. Well, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today with our listeners. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And, we're really open here. So if anybody has any extra questions, they can follow me on Twitter. It's just Evan Ehrenberg, or call Clara Health and reach out. We're always happy to share our thoughts in the industry or startups or anything people want to know about. That's great. I'm sure people will have questions and want to get a hold of you. Cool. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show and for running this. Thank you so much for listening. I know you're busy working to bring your life-changing innovation to market, and I value your time and your attention. To save time and get the latest episodes on your mobile device automatically, subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Thank you for listening, and I appreciate everyone who's been sharing the show with friends and colleagues. See you on the next episode of COIQ.